So this interview with Tomi Lahren and Charlamagne Tha God is pretty awesome, and you'll notice that I didn't use anywhere in the title or in the description Tomi Lahren versus Charlamagne Tha God. I did that on purpose because this isn't really an adversary type relationship that I want to portray like the media does. The media wants to be divisive, and what better than to be divisive than versus in between something? So it's Tomi Lahren and Charlamagne Tha God.
When it came to the Black Panthers or the Black Lives Matter, I feel like you weren't looking at those movements in their whole totality. I feel like you was taking, bits or watching certain people in the movements and painting the whole picture. And it's like you told me when we had a conversation about Trump supporters. I asked you in private, how could you empower somebody? How could you support somebody who empowers such hate? And you told me that wasn't the whole totality of the movement, but you did admit that it was certain people in that support Trump who are just straight up racist, but that doesn't represent the whole totality of the movement. So I feel like we all do that. I watch a soundbite, from CNN or MSNBC or whoever and see a fight at a Trump rally, and then in my mind, I'm like, damn, all Trump supporters are racist, all Trump supporters are bigots. But that can't necessarily be the case, right?
Now, I want to say, first off, that I agree more with Tomi than I do with Charlamagne. That said, I think Charlamagne is awesome because he's intellectually honest. He's not. I don't think any of the stuff that he's saying is just lies. I think maybe one or two little things are exaggerations, maybe. But everyone does that. I think he's being as honest as possible. So when I criticize him, I don't want people to think that I'm calling him a liar. For the most part, I want to say, as I delve into this video for the fourth or fifth time. But I think he's being intellectually honest. I don't think he's being intentionally, exaggerating. Well, it happened somewhere, or or BLM is perfect or whatever. I don't think he's got that attitude because I don't think he's a central piece of any of those movements. He may be a figure that some of those movements look to or use, but I don't think he is a leader of any of these movements, which is a good thing because it makes him a little bit less biased.
No, of course not. But, I will say this, Charlamagne, and I said this to you earlier. I think that the Black Lives Matter group was started with the best intentions.
Now, some people might say that Tomi's throwing a bone to BLM when she says, I think it started with the best intentions. And maybe not. But one thing that you have to remember is that she's looking at it not from her perspective in terms of best intentions, because for the most part, she is very pro law enforcement and whatnot. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just have to be pro good law enforcement. And I'm not aware of her supporting law enforcement blindly. That would be, I guess, something I could expand on. But I guess I'm saying that she's looking at this from the perspective of people who believe they were wronged, whether or not it's true or not. And I say that very, very as neutrally as possible. I don't want anybody to confuse that with I'm calling people a liar, because there are bad cops. I know that. I've worked with law enforcement before, and I can tell you that there are a lot of good cops. So when people say all cops are bad and fry them like bacon or whatever, it's just, it gets to me because I know it's not true. I know not all cops are bad. So anyways, continuing.
Break your concentration. I didn't mean to do that. Please, continue. You were saying something about best intentions?
However, I do think they lose some legitimacy when they are rioting and looting and causing problems. And it wasn't a few individuals, because when you have to declare a state of emergency and the National Guard has to be called in to several cities in the past year, I don't think that that's a few individuals. And I would hope that the movement itself, because they do have the best intentions in mind, would rein in their own and say, this is not us, this is not what we stand for. I have yet to see that. I'm hopeful that will come out of this movement. I know that they're a well-funded movement at this point, so I would hope to see that leadership. I just haven't seen it yet.
And yeah, she brings valid points. The National Guard did have to be called in on certain events where BLM was a key presence, or they were key instigators, so to speak. And my problem with that is you don't have the key leaders of this movement denouncing it. You don't have the key leaders of this movement controlling it. It doesn't seem like they have much control from my perspective, but I could be wrong, and they could just be allowing this. I don't know. But one thing is for sure, they have a lot of funding now, and with that funding, you would think it would go towards proper education and proper control and management of BLM. And on the other hand, with Trump supporters, I just there really weren't any events where the National Guard was called in, and there were a couple of rowdy incidents, but a lot of it was painted bad by the media. And I know people are going to say, well, the media is painting BLM bad. And I'm going to call BS on that, because the media just kind of presents, in the case of BLM, all they have to do is just put a camera on BLM at some of these crazy things, and you'll see their obviously racist comments like, oh, he's white, go get him, as you see in the Milwaukee video.
Get their ass! They beating up every white person. They jumping every white person. Man, no white person come down Sherman. He white. Beat his shit, bitch. That's what it's for. Hey, look. White boy. They beating up every white person. They made the squad cars leave.
Or in Dallas with the, what do we want? Dead cops. You see that, and that's clear evidence. Whereas with the Trump stuff, it's more smoke and mirrors, at least to me. I mean, I could be wrong, or alternatively, you could just have a different perspective. But I think Trump had more control over his constituents, so to speak, and his fans or whatever, than BLM had over their movement people.
But isn't that what the media does, though? The media always focuses on the worst. So even if it is a group of people saying, look, that's not what Black Lives Matter represents, all we want is, justice for young black men. What we really want is for black men, unarmed black women not to be killed at the hands of the police. But when they are, we just want some justice to be served. We don't want mistrials like in the Walter Scott case.
He wants justice. And in the case of hang trials, look, you can't control a hung jury. That doesn't mean the state's going to stop prosecuting. They're going to go after him again. And if that's not enough, he's already been prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of South Carolina and Maine Justice, DOJ. So he's already been punished, and he's likely going to face a stiff sentence in South Carolina. They don't mess around down there. I think South Carolina is a very good example of an area where they come together without all of this violence and hate. After that Dylan Roof nut job killed all those people at that black church, I mean, people came together. You saw blacks, whites, whatever, together at churches and whatnot. And I think it's a good example of religion bringing people together. That's another topic, but, to any atheists out there, that's an example of religious being good for the individual or good for the community.
Things of that nature. So I think that they don't ever focus on those people. Just like with the Trump supporters, they don't ever focus on, the person who may say, hey, I'm with Donald Trump because he's anti-establishment or he's anti-government, or we feel like we need somebody from the outside to come shake up Washington. All they ever show on the news is the old rednecks who are like, back in my day, we used to treat them like this, treat them like that. So I think that's the media's fault.
No, I think, and I will agree with you that in part it could be Charlamagne, but I mean, on a larger scale, and you and I have more conversations to be had about this, and I think there's more healing to come. But I do think when it becomes a state of emergency and the National Guard has to be called in, it's no longer even a dozen people. It's become much bigger than that at that point. But there's more discussions that need to be had. And, I'm hoping with the change in presidency, we do have a change in the culture and the change in the way we discuss these things, and that we can come together, because that's the only way we're going to do it, is when you and I talk. The last thing I do want to talk about, though, is your book that's coming out in April. I think it's an amazing message. It's called Black Privilege. Can you tell my audience a little bit about that? I think even my followers might find this really enlightening.
Yeah, Black privilege. Opportunity comes to those who create it. Like I told you earlier, I believe in the power and privilege of God.
So I cut it off there for whatever reason. I think I ran out of hard drive space with the screen recording because I had it going for a bit on some other stuff too. But that said, I think I will check that book out, and I think other people should probably check it out to get another view, and probably not a traditional view. Now, I think it's very important that when he mentions Black Panthers and BLM more or less in the same sentence, or at least in the same 5 minutes, it's important to distinguish different levels of movements. Just like, feminism has different movements. You have first, second, and third wave feminism. And when I criticize feminism, I'm talking about third wave feminism almost exclusively, because that's more of the problem, I think. The civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s and whatnot, and into the 70s and whatnot, was not as tainted with absurdity, so to speak, as the current one. And a lot of the stuff that these people are calling for has already been put in place, and a lot of it's outdated and not antiqued, but they aren't looking at the reality of the situation. So with that said, thanks for watching. New America Sheriff out.